Paper 85. The Origins of Worship. Humans have worshipped everything on earth, including themselves. The first object to be worshipped was a stone. Stone worship was followed by hill worship. Humans believed that gods inhabited mountains. Plants were worshipped because they were a source of intoxicants. Alcohol is still referred to as spirits. Sprouting grains were sources of awe, and many plants were venerated for their medicinal powers. Tree worship cults leave remnants of their beliefs in modern-day maypoles, Christmas trees, and the superstition of knocking on wood. The primitive races revered animals, earth, air, fire, water, springs, rivers, rainbows, wind, clouds, rain, hail, thunder, and lightning. Deification of the moon, stars, and sun developed. Civilizations honored the sun by naming the first day of the week after it. Sun veneration eventually led to Mithraism, the greatest of the mystery cults, which eventually wielded a potent influence on Christianity. In some cultures, people worshipped lunatics, epileptics, priests, kings, and prophets. When tribal chiefs died, they were sometimes deified. Later, distinguished people who died were sainted. The worship of man by men reached its peak when earthly rulers claimed to have descended from the gods. The sixth adjutant mind spirit has been at work throughout time, constantly stimulating the worship urge. When worship is directed by wisdom and meditation, it begins to develop into real religion. When wisdom prevails, worshippers turn from the adoration of nature to the adoration of the creator of nature. Evolutionary religion creates gods in the likeness of mortal man, but revelatory religion seeks to transform mortal man into the image and likeness of God. Paper 86. Early Evolution of Religion. Primitive people lived in constant danger. Their struggle for survival depended on factors over which they had no control. Chance played such a large role in early human life that people lived in continuous anxiety. Most people died violently. Natural deaths were so unusual that people thought they were caused by spirits. Helplessness against the forces of nature impelled early man to seek to understand supernatural phenomena. Belief in the afterlife began when people dreamed of deceased tribesmen. Belief in the soul started when men observed that breath was present in living creatures but not in the dead. They speculated that the breath lived on as a ghost after death. Disembodied ghosts were thought to be responsible for all inexplicable events. Primitive people thought that the soul could escape the body during fainting, sleeping, comas, death, or sneezing. Dreams were thought to be adventures of the soul. People believed that disembodied souls could enter animals and inanimate objects. Shadows were feared and mirrors were regarded with superstition. The religion of ghost fear led people to believe that a spirit world controlled human destiny and that they could appease the spirits by regulating personal conduct. Rituals helped to relieve people from their unrelenting fears by helping them believe that they had the power to influence their own fate. The idea that specific actions could help one avoid angering wandering ghosts was the seed of the concept of right and wrong. From this humble beginning, human ethics were born. Mortal minds began to prepare for the bestowal of true spirit forces, the indwelling fragments of God who have labored ceaselessly to transform the fear of God into the love of God. Paper 87. The Ghost Cults. Early men feared death because death meant the creation of a new ghost. Ghosts were thought to have supernatural powers, but not supernatural intelligence. Attempts to trick ghosts led to many strange behaviors, some of which continue in today's world. Some people still imagine that an outward pretense of piety can win the favor of God. Primitive men believed that angry ghosts were sources of grief and misfortune. They avoided houses where death had occurred, and this ritual delayed early tribes from building permanent villages. People observed silence during mourning to encourage the ghost to leave. Wives were sometimes buried alive with their dead husbands, and slaves were buried with their masters. Sometimes months were spent in the inactivity of mourning. Tools, weapons, and other property were destroyed for the use of the ghost. Ancient funerals wasted enormous amounts of resources, and it was a great advance when the notion of inheritance replaced burning and burying the dead person's property. Divination, soothsaying, astrology, magic, and many other strange practices developed from early people's attempts to trick ghosts. Children were kept inside after dark, people were afraid to yawn, and phallic cults appeared. Women were veiled. The advancement of art was stifled because beauty supposedly incited the envy of ghosts. Ghost cult rituals were designed to ward off bad luck. Later men attempted to court good luck by bribing ghosts. Humans still tend to bargain with deity. Cursing and finger-crossing are remnants of ancient ghost cult rituals. Cults throughout history have had both positive and negative results for human civilization. Cults retard social progress but preserve ceremony. They can either stifle or enhance philosophy. Cults serve as skeletal structures around which the living body of personal spiritual experience grows. Paper 88. Fetishes, Charms, and Magic. Fetishism is the belief that spirits can enter objects, animals, or persons. Primitive fetishes included volcanoes, comets, pebbles, fire, holy water, trees, plants, fruits, animals, days of the week, numbers, saliva, hair, nails, skulls, umbilical cords, handicapped people, lunatics, intoxicants, poisons, bones, fireplaces, altars, and temples. Odd customs arose from fetishism. Friday was considered an unlucky day. 3 and 7 were lucky numbers, but 13 was unlucky. When animals became fetishes, taboos evolved around eating them. When geniuses were considered fetishes, talented humans often resorted to fraud and trickery to wield power and authority over other men. The Israelites believed that the Spirit of God literally lived in their stone altars. Skeletal remains of saints and heroes are regarded with superstitious awe even in modern times. Magical properties were attributed to human flesh, tiger claws, crocodile teeth, snake venom, bones, bodily secretions, effigies, black cats, wands, drums, bells, and knots. Names were esteemed so highly that many ancients had two: a sacred name which they did not reveal, and a common name for everyday use. Moses tried to control the fetish worship of the Hebrews by forbidding them to create images. This lessened fetish worship but greatly retarded art and the enjoyment of beauty. Moses' mandate against fetishes became a fetish. Words become fetishes, especially those words considered to be words of God. When doctrines become fetishes, they can lead to bigotry, intolerance, and fanaticism. Holy books have become fetishes, and the practice of opening a book at random to seek advice is a form of fetishism. Totemism was a combination of social and religious observance. Totems have largely been replaced by flags and other national symbols. Modern fetishes include the insignias of priests, the symbols of royalty, and public opinion. In the past, medicine men, priests, and shamans practiced public magic for the good of the whole tribe. Witches, wizards, and sorcerers might use personal magic to bring evil to their enemies or good to themselves. Chants and incantations were thought to be magical. Gestures, dances, and mimicry were even more so. Magic was thought to be a way to secure insight into the future. Magic gained a powerful influence over primitive people, who feared magic so much that their own fears sometimes killed them. Ancient magic served the human race as the cocoon of modern science. Incantations became prayers, astrology became astronomy, and the study of magic numbers led to the science of mathematics. Such words as spellbound, possession, inspiration, ingenious, thunderstruck, entrancing, and astonished all have roots in the belief in magical spirits. Today, superstitions linger even in the minds of civilized people. Mankind is slow to leave magic behind. Paper 89. Sin, Sacrifice, and Atonement. Primitive people believed that spirits enjoyed human misery, and that staying in favor with the gods depended on either doing or avoiding specific things. This belief led to the birth of taboos. Later, religion made taboos into sins, confession, renunciation, and sacrifices developed. People bargained for the favor of God by fasting, chastity, voluntary poverty, and self-torture. Early sacrifices included plucking hair, knocking out teeth, cutting off fingers, and other mutilations. People offered sacrifices to the gods as thanksgiving and for the redemption of debts. Later, the idea of sacrificial substitution evolved into the atonement concept, an insurance policy against the displeasure of deity. Cannibalism at one time was nearly universal, serving social, economic, religious, and military purposes. The Sangic races were cannibalistic, The pure-line Andonites, Nodites, and Adamites were not. The Dalmatia taboo against cannibalism spread throughout the world, and cannibalism fell greatly out of common practice once human sacrifice made human flesh the food of the gods. Human sacrifice endured various modifications, including animal sacrifice, enforced exile, temple prostitution, temple virgins, bloodletting, physical mutilation, circumcision, castration, piercing, tattooing, and scarring. Moses tried to put an end to human sacrifice among the Hebrews by inventing a system of ransoms to priests as a substitute. The practices of ransom, redemption, and covenants have evolved into the modern-day sacraments. Early prayers were crude bartering agreements with the spirit world, but they demonstrated human progress in that people had evolved to the point that they dared to make deals with God. Paper 90. Shamanism, medicine men, and priests. As rituals became increasingly complex, people came to believe that only medicine men and shamans could communicate with the spirit world, and religion became a second-hand experience. Since abnormal human behavior was attributed to spirit possession, qualification for religious leadership included such things as epilepsy, hysteria, and paranoia. Some shamans were deliberate frauds, but many truly believed that they were possessed by spirits. Shamans helped people control the hazards of their lives. They also specialized in rainmaking, healing, and crime detection. Shamans were great believers in chance as a revelatory tool. They frequently cast lots to arrive at decisions. Evidence of this practice survives into modern times in children's rhymes. Other tools of a shaman's trade were astrology, interpretation of dreams, communicating with the dead, and fortune-telling. Shamans were the original aristocracy, exempt from all tribal restrictions. They often functioned as doctors and surgeons. Injuries and illnesses that could not be attributed to obvious causes were thought to be caused by ghosts, magic, or a violation of the taboos. People greatly feared the sick, believing that ghosts had become displeased with the sufferer. Remedies for illness included chanting, howling, laying on of hands, breathing on the patient, massage, bloodletting, vapor baths, drumming, fasting, dieting, and purging. Superstitious fears of the unknown and dread of the unseen were scaffolding for human concepts of God. Shamans eventually evolved into modern-day priests. Priests have done much to delay scientific development, but have also contributed to the stabilization of civilization and have sometimes been invaluable in pointing the way to higher realities. Paper 91. The Evolution of Prayer. Early men often prayed for food, shelter, or rain. Praying for material blessings is a perversion of prayer, but it encouraged primitive people to seek these necessities by ethical means. True prayer appears only in conjunction with the understanding that God is a personal being. Prayer contributes to the conservation of social, moral, and spiritual values. Prayer is a psychological procedure combined with a spiritual technique that promotes development of religious sentiment. It induces humans to look in two directions for help, to the subconscious mind for material aid, and to the superconscious mind for inspiration and guidance. Prayer must be a stimulus for action rather than a substitute for action. It often affects lasting change in the person who prays. Prayer contributes to health, personal happiness, self-control, social harmony, and spiritual attainment. God does not solve man's difficulties, but he will provide wisdom and strength while man resolutely attacks his problems himself. Contact with the indwelling adjuster is favored by meditation, but it is more frequently prompted through loving service to others. Religious experience benefits the individual by bringing better physical health, more efficient mental function, socialization of religious experience, increased God consciousness, and enhanced appreciation of truth, beauty, and goodness. Genuine prayer is spontaneous God consciousness. Words are irrelevant to prayer because God answers man's attitudes, not his words. To attain effective prayer, one must consider the laws of prevailing petitions. Effective prayer requires the petitioner to sincerely and courageously face problems that come up. Exhaust the capacity to solve the problem by human means. Surrender every wish of mind and every craving of soul to the transforming embrace of spiritual growth. Make a wholehearted choice to follow the divine will. Recognize the Father's will and translate it into action. Pray for divine wisdom and have living faith. Paper 92. The later evolution of religion. Religion has progressed from nature worship through ghost worship to fetishism. Throughout history, fear has been the basic religious stimulus, but as civilization advances, fear becomes modified by reverence and repentance. Attempts to suddenly accelerate religious growth are unwise. Religion clings to mores, traditions become sacred, passing generations are afraid to discard what their ancestors deemed holy. Morality is not determined by evolutionary religion, rather, religious forms are dictated by morality. At some time in history, all that is now considered immoral was once accepted. Religion has handicapped social development in many ways, but without religion there would have been no enduring morality or worthwhile civilization. Religion has provided the discipline and self-control that makes wisdom possible. Evolutionary religion, unlike science, does not provide for its own correction. The only two influences that can uplift religious dogma are the pressure of advancing mores and periodic epical revelations. Evolutionary religion must continue to be refined by revealed religion and genuine science, but revelation cannot be far removed from the thoughts of the era in which it is presented. Evolutionary religion is a human reaction to the spiritual world. Revelatory religion is the spirit realm's reaction to the human search for truth. Revelation is always limited by human capacity. There have been many events of religious revelation, but only 5 were of epical significance: the planetary prince's arrival, the mission of Adam and Eve, Melchizedek's teachings, Jesus' teachings, and the Urantia papers. The 5th epical revelation differs from all previous revelations because it is the collaborative work of many persons instead of just one person. There is an instinctive longing in the human heart for help from above. This impulse was designed to foster the work of the planetary prince and the material sons and daughters. People have always venerated their leaders, sometimes even at the expense of his teachings. There have been hundreds upon hundreds of religious leaders on our planet who have served as the personality fulcrums on which the levers of revelation depend. New religions cannot be invented. They either evolve or are suddenly revealed. Religions are good if they bring mortals to God and bring the realization of God to mortals. It is wise to study and assimilate the truths contained in every faith. It is arrogance for any group of religionists to think that they possess the only truth. The quality of religion is indicated by loyalties, values, and the cosmic progress of the persons involved. Religion is devotion to the service of supreme values, a living experience of love, a technique of thinking, and the eternal foundation of all enduring civilizations. No revelation short of the attainment of the Universal Father can ever be complete. All other celestial ministrations are partial adaptations to local conditions in time and space. Paper 93. Masheventa Melchizedek. The Melchizedek sons often function in emergencies and have been exceptionally active on our planet. 12 Melchizedeks took authority here shortly after the Caligastia default. These same 12 stayed until Adam and Eve arrived and returned after Eve's default. After the days of Adam and Eve, human beings slowly began to lose sight of the concept of God. To prevent the light of truth from going out, one of the 12 Melchizedeks, Masheventa, volunteered to personalize on Earth in human form to bring a new revelation of truth to Urantia. Masheventa appeared in Palestine almost 2,000 years before Jesus was born. His metamorphosis was achieved in cooperation with the life carriers and other celestial personalities. Masheventa was first seen on Earth when he entered the tent of a herder and announced, "I am Melchizedek, priest of El Elyon, the Most High, the one and only God." Within a few years, Melchizedek had gathered a nucleus of disciples who formed the later community of Salem, now Jerusalem. Masheventa resembled a man of the blended Nodite and Sumerian races. He spoke 7 languages. Masheventa wore an emblem of 3 concentric circles on his clothing. This symbol became so sacred to his followers that they never dared use it. Few followers ever learned that the circles symbolized the infinity, eternity, and universality of the Paradise Trinity. Melchizedek taught people that there was only one God, and that the favor of God depended on faith rather than sacrifices. Melchizedek substituted the sacrament of bread and wine for the older sacrifice of flesh and blood. He asked his followers to obey 7 commandments and to spread the word of his teachings to all men. His ideas were too advanced for most people of those days, They simply could not grasp the idea of receiving divine favor through faith alone. Because of the need to establish contact with a human family through whom Mashavinta could work to promote the new teachings, the Melchizedeks for many generations had been watching the ancestors of Abraham. They were confident that within a certain generation, someone would appear who would be intelligent, wise, sincere, and capable of taking initiative. From this family, Melchizedek chose Abraham to study with him at Salem. Abraham had kingly ambitions. In time, he was recognized as the civil ruler of Salem and 7 other tribes. Melchizedek maintained peaceful relations with the neighboring tribes, but Abraham envisioned the military conquest of all Canaan. Only with difficulty did Melchizedek restrain Abraham from using warfare to force the neighboring tribes to more quickly learn the truths of Salem. Mashavinta's disapproval of Abraham's schemes for military conquest caused a temporary severance of their relationship. As time passed, Abraham found himself well on the way to becoming the head of a powerful civil state in Palestine, but he was held back by 2 concerns. The lack of Melchizedek's sanction of his plan, and that he had no son to continue his reign. Abraham arranged a conference with Melchizedek. Melchizedek persuaded Abraham to abandon his scheme of military leadership in favor of spiritual promotion of the kingdom of heaven. In exchange, Melchizedek promised Abraham that he would produce an heir and many descendants. Abraham's wife, Sarah, subsequently gave birth to Isaac. Soon after the child was born, Abraham and Melchizedek made a formal covenant in which Abraham surrendered his personal ambitions on behalf of the greater good of fostering Melchizedek's spiritual goals for humankind. The covenant between Melchizedek and Abraham represents the great agreement between divinity and humanity wherein God agrees to do everything, while man agrees simply to believe God's promises and to follow his instructions. From their Salem headquarters, Melchizedek's missionaries traveled to Egypt, Mesopotamia, Asia Minor, the British Isles, Iceland, China, and Japan. His teachings reached the descendants of Adamson, still living around the shores of Lake Van. Mashavinta continued to instruct his students for 94 years. When he had done all he could, he disappeared without fanfare, just as he had arrived. Abraham's descendants lost much of the Salem teachings. Within 500 years, many people regarded the story of Melchizedek as a myth. The Melchizedek gospel was almost completely absorbed into the cults of the Great Mother, the Sun, and other ancient beliefs. Hebrew scribes later edited out scriptural references to Melchizedek in an attempt to bolster their national ego by exalting the memory of Abraham. After leaving Urantia, Mashavinta Melchizedek resumed his career as one of the 12 receivers of Urantia. He continues to take great interest in the affairs of the descendants of those who had believed in him in the flesh. Mashavinta has recently been named Vicegerent Planetary Prince of Urantia. Paper 94, The Melchizedek Teachings in the Orient. The strength of the Brahmin priests in their rituals prevented the people of ancient India from accepting the Melchizedek idea of salvation through faith alone. The Brahmin priests had invested so much in being at the top of the caste system that they could not allow people to believe that faith was the only requirement for a relationship with God. The Rig Veda, one of the oldest sacred books on earth, was written by the Brahmins in an attempt to combat the teachings of the Salem missionaries. The rejection of the Melchizedek gospel was a major turning point in the civilization of India. As people rejected mortal ambitions and embraced reincarnation, they fell into a sense of spiritual hopelessness. Nevertheless, Brahmanism was a noble human effort into philosophy and metaphysics. It came close to the concept of an all-pervading absolute, the ITIS rather than the I am. Brahmin teachings about universal over-control were very close to the truth about the Supreme Being. The idea of karma bears some similarity to truth about inevitable repercussions of one's actions. The teaching of the soul being the indwelling of the Brahmin approaches the concept of the thought adjuster, even including the point that the soul returns to Brahman as the adjuster returns to the Father. The Hindu religion today is a composite of the Brahmin teachings, ancient Vedic rituals, Buddhism, and Jainism. Hinduism is the most tolerant religion on earth and has survived as part of the social fabric of India. In China, the Salem teachings led to an early form of Taoism, a very different religion than that which exists today. Early Taoism encompassed the monotheistic teachings of Xing Langton, a version of the Melchizedek teachings, and the Brahman concepts. In Japan, this version of Taoism was known as Shinto. In both Japan and China, Taoism eventually became mixed with ancestor worship. In the 6th century before Jesus' bestowal, an unusual coordination of spiritual agencies influenced a great number of religious teachers throughout the world. Lao Tzu taught about one first cause, the Tao, man's destiny of being united with Tao, the Trinity as the source of all reality, and returning good for evil. Lao Tzu's teachings about non-resistance later became perverted into the erroneous belief of seeing, doing, and thinking nothing. Today's Taoism has little in common with the teachings of Lao Tzu. Confucius' chief work was a compilation of the wise sayings of ancient philosophers. His writings were not widely known or accepted during his lifetime, but became a great influence ever afterward in both China and Japan. Confucius put morality in the place of magic, and taught about the way of heaven, the patterns of the cosmos. In India, Gautama Siddhartha formed the beginnings of Buddhism. He fought against the growing caste system by teaching a gospel of universal salvation and freedom from sacrifice, rituals, torture, and priests. He taught that divine nature resided in all men, and that we could attain the realization of this divinity. His ideas were surprisingly similar to the Salem Gospel. Modern Buddhism is no more the teachings of Siddhartha than modern Christianity is the teachings of Jesus. The farther Buddhism spread from India, the more it was mixed with other religions. It was affected by Taoism, Shinto, and Christianity. Buddhism today is a growing religion because it conserves high moral values, promotes calmness and self-control, and augments serenity and happiness. Paper 95, Melchizedek Teachings in the Levant. In Mesopotamia, Salem missionaries failed to bring a permanent realization of monotheism. Mesopotamians believed in multiple gods and were especially fond of Ishtar and the sex worship that accompanied her devotions. When the Salem teachers tried to abolish temple harlotry, Mesopotamians resisted. They subsequently rejected all of the spiritual and philosophic teachings of the Salemites. In Egypt, a strong moral code was already in place, and the Salem religion flourished. One of the few great Egyptian prophets was Amenemop. He taught that riches were a gift from God, that every moment should be lived in the realization of the presence of God, and that all things earthly were fleeting. Amenemop wrote the Book of Wisdom, much of which is preserved as passages in the Book of Proverbs, and also the first Psalm. His writings were translated into Greek and Hebrew. Akhenaten, Pharaoh of Egypt, had been taught monotheism by his mother. Akhenaten kept the doctrine of one God alive in Egypt. He had the clearest grasp of the religion of Salem of any person outside of Melchizedek's time. In his determination to swing the nation from polytheism to monotheism, Akhenaten broke with the past, changed his name, abandoned his capital, built a new city, and created new art and literature for his people. Akhenaten taught that God made not only Egypt, but all the lands and all the people in the world. This teaching was too much for the nationalistic priests, who sprang back into power after Akhenaten's death. Although his teachings did not remain in force after he died, the concept of monotheism never again entirely died out in Egypt. Akhenaten wrote 137 hymns, 12 of which are recorded in the Book of Psalms. In Iran, Melchizedek's doctrines advanced for 500 years until a change of rulers led to the persecution of monotheistic teachers. Monotheism had become practically extinct in Iran when Zoroaster, the great prophet of Persia, appeared to revive the Salem Gospel. He used the flame as a symbol of the wise spirit of universal dominance. Zoroastrianism is the only religion on earth that retained the concepts of the 7 master spirits, which Zoroaster learned about in Uar. Jewish beliefs in heaven, hell, and devils all derived from Zoroastrianism. The Salem teachers failed most completely in Arabia, so near to Salem itself. This desert region continued as it had for thousands of years, with each tribe worshipping its ancient fetish and many families praying to their own household gods. Long did the struggle continue between the Babylonian Ishtar, the Hebrew Yahweh, the Iranian Ahura, and the Christian father of Jesus. Never was one concept able fully to displace the others. The people of Arabia did not universally embrace monotheism until the times of Islam. Paper 96, Yahweh, God of the Hebrews. The early Semites had varying ideas of God, even during the same period. They worshipped Yahweh, El Elyon, El Shaddai, El, and Elohim. They believed in nature gods and other subordinate spirits. Moses initiated the Hebrew belief in monotheism. Moses' mother was a member of the Egyptian royal family, and his father was a Semite liaison between the Egyptian government and the Hebrew slaves. Moses tried to negotiate for Hebrew freedom, but the agreement was later repudiated by the Pharaoh. A year later, while the Egyptian armies were busy elsewhere, Moses led his followers out of Egypt in a spectacular escape. Moses comprehended Egyptian philosophy. He had been educated as a child about El Shaddai, and through his father-in-law he learned of El Elyon. The slaves he led knew little about such things, but had retained a vague memory of Yahweh, the god of Mount Horeb. During their extended encampment at the base of Mount Horeb, Moses wisely adjusted his teachings of the one God, attributing all the qualities of the Creator to Yahweh, the familiar God of his ignorant people. It is unlikely that Moses' advanced monotheistic teachings would have held the attention of the ex-captives if it had not been for the fortuitous eruption of the Horeb volcano during the third week they camped there. Moses used the occurrence to convince his people that their God was mighty and all-powerful, above all other gods, who had singled out the Hebrews as his chosen people. The Hebrew concept of a jealous God first sprang from this event. Moses was the most important spiritual teacher between Melchizedek and Jesus. He was an extraordinary combination of military leader, social organizer, and religious teacher. After his death, progress in the understanding of Yahweh rapidly deteriorated among the Hebrews. Leaders of Israel continued to believe, but the common people drifted backward in their beliefs, becoming contaminated with the less advanced Canaanite religious practices. The Book of Psalms records various concepts of God from the times of Amenemop to Isaiah, from the crude idea of tribal deity to the expanded ideal of a loving and merciful Father. The Book of Job is derived from over 20 Mesopotamians who lived over a period of 300 years. The idea of God during those centuries was best preserved near Ur in Chaldea. In Palestine, the wisdom of God was understood, but his love and mercy were not. Only those from Ur continued to preach about the mercy of God and salvation by faith. Paper 97. Evolution of the God Concept Among the Hebrews. The Hebrews accomplished the greatest feat in the evolution of religion when they transformed Yahweh, the savage, jealous God of Sinai, into the loving Creator of all things, the merciful Father of all mankind. After the times of Moses, the Hebrew people regressed in their religious practices. When Hebrew leaders combined their tribes to stave off hostile neighbors in Palestine, Samuel, a teacher from a long line of Salem teachers, used the new central government to turn Israel away from the worship of Baal and back to the worship of Yahweh. His great contribution was the pronouncement that Yahweh was changeless, perfect, and divine. Samuel taught that the favor of Yahweh was not shown through material prosperity. Samuel progressed in his understanding of God throughout his lifetime, eventually knowing him as a merciful judge. Samuel's successors continued his legacy, preaching a God of divine power. 1,000 years before Christ, the Hebrews split into two nations. Spiritual decadence set in. Elijah worked diligently to restore the northern kingdom to a God concept similar to the days of Samuel by devoting himself to demolishing the altars of Baal and other idols. There was a long-standing controversy between followers of Yahweh and followers of Baal. The southern tribes believed in one God. They thought that land belonged to Yahweh. It could not be bought and sold. The northern tribes, Canaanites and Baalites, believed in many Baals and in the right to buy and sell land. Elijah succeeded in his work by shifting the Yahweh-Baal controversy from the issue of land ownership to the issue of monotheism versus polytheism. Amos discovered new concepts of deity. From Amos, the Hebrews heard for the first time that God would no more tolerate their sins than he would tolerate the sins of other nations. This direct attack on the chosen people doctrine was resented by many Hebrews. Amos proclaimed that Yahweh was the God of all nations, and that ritual could not replace righteousness. Hosea followed Amos with a doctrine of forgiveness through repentance rather than sacrifice. His gospel was one of divine mercy and loving kindness. The first Isaiah preached the eternal nature of God, his infinite wisdom and reliability. He was followed by Micah and Obadiah, who denounced priestly rituals and attacked the systems of sacrifice. Jeremiah declared that Yahweh was God of all the earth, of all nations and all peoples, and that God did not defend Hebrews in their military struggles against other nations. He was cast into a dungeon for this accurate statement. The Hebrew nation fell before the armies of Babylon. While in captivity in Mesopotamia, Hebrew priests prepared a textbook to bolster the courage of their people. Although they had no intention of writing a sacred book, their textbook later became scripture. In their fervor, these priests destroyed every known record of Hebrew history to make way for their newly written glorification of the Hebrew race. The priests were greatly hindered in their influence over the captives by Isaiah II, a true believer in the God of justice, love, and mercy. His theories of the nature of God were so compelling that he made converts equally among the Jews and their captors. The writings of the second Isaiah are preserved in the book of Isaiah, chapters 40 through 55. Isaiah taught eloquently about God as universal creator and upholder. His writings are among the truest presentations of God's character before the time of Jesus. The Jewish religion of the Old Testament was born in Babylon during the captivity. The Hebrews concluded that if they were to prevail, they must convert the Gentiles. They had to become the chosen servants of God. The leaders preached that the Jews would be a chosen people, not due to special indulgences from God, but because they would perform the special service of carrying the truth of one God to all people. But when the Babylonian captivity ended, the Jewish people returned to their rituals. Without losing the concept of the universal Father, the Hebrews fell into spiritual retrogression. Jewish theology refused to expand. Judaism persists today by virtue of its strong institutions and deep love of justice, wisdom, truth, and righteousness. Paper 98. The Melchizedek Teachings in the Occident. In Palestine, religious dogma stifled rational thinking. In Greece, human thought became so abstract that the concept of God faded. The Salem missionaries failed to build a great religious structure in Greece. Their rigid interpretation of Melchizedek's admonition not to function as priests prevented any priesthood of influence from arising in Greece. The Greeks rejected monotheism because they believed that fate controlled even the gods. Eventually, Greek ethics and philosophy advanced beyond the boundaries of their spirituality. Intelligent Greeks steeped themselves in philosophy and metaphysics, disdaining all forms of worship. They held loosely to the idea of a great source. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle forged Hellenic intellectual advancement. The common people who could not understand deep philosophy rejected both the philosophers and the Salem teachers in favor of the mystery cults. The Roman state religion, greatly influenced by the Greeks, had a full range of gods and goddesses. Many cults flourished in Rome until the time of Augustus Caesar, who reorganized the state religion and appointed himself supreme god. A small cult of cynics were the last of the believers in Melchizedek's teachings. The majority of Greco-Romans turned to the spectacular and emotional mystery cults, which offered promises of salvation after death. The most popular mystery cults were the Phrygian cult of Cybele and her son Attis, the Egyptian cult of Osiris and his mother Isis, and the Iranian cult of Mithras, redeemer of all mankind. Mithraism eventually overshadowed every other cult. By the time it entered Rome, the Mithraic cult had been upstepped by the teachings of Zoroaster. Legends and rituals of this cult included a flood from which one man escaped in a special boat, a Last Supper after which Mithras ascended into the heavens, and an annual festival on the 25th of December. Mithraics believed that the unbaptized would be annihilated, the wicked would be destroyed by fire, and the righteous would rule with Mithras forever. During the 3rd century after Jesus, Mithraic and Christian churches were very similar. Most churches were underground and contained altars depicting the suffering of the Savior. Mithraic worshippers dipped their fingers in holy water upon entering the temple. Both religions baptized believers and used the sacrament of bread and wine. The two religions differed in that Mithraism encouraged militarism while Christianity was pacifist. The deciding factor in the struggle between the two faiths was that Christianity allowed full fellowship for women. The Christian religion is a complex combination of the Melchizedek teachings, Hebrew morality, ethics, and theology, the Zoroastrian concept of the struggle between good and evil, the mystery cults, particularly Mithraism, the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, the personal beliefs of Paul of Tarsus, and Hellenistic philosophy. Christianity valiantly portrays a beautiful religion about Jesus but has long ceased to be the religion of Jesus. It glorifies Jesus as Christ, but has largely forgotten his personal gospel, the fatherhood of God and the universal brotherhood of all people. Paper 99. The Social Problems of Religion. In the modern age, we are faced with rapid adjustments of civilization. Society is becoming more mechanical, more complex, and more interdependent. It will not settle for 1,000 years. The function of religion during this transition period will be to stabilize human ideals. In the midst of the confusions of a rapidly changing environment, humans need the sustenance of a cosmic perspective. Religionists should function individually rather than as groups. Individual religionists are certainly sympathetic to social suffering, civil injustice, economic thinking, and political tyranny, but as a group, they should confine their efforts to the furtherance of purely religious causes. Religion directly influences social reconstruction by increasing the spirituality of individuals. Religion creates insight into human fellowships, puts new meaning into group associations, imparts new value to play, and exalts true humor. It grows when it is disciplined by constructive criticism, amplified by philosophy, purified by science, and nourished by loyal fellowship. True religion is a meaningful way of living everyday life. Religion inspires us to live courageously and joyfully, joining patience with passion, insight with zeal, sympathy with power, and ideals with energy. Religious experience unfailingly yields the fruits of the Spirit. Religionists express their religion through wholehearted service to the brotherhood of man. Knowing God as a Father is a personal religious experience. The corollary of this experience, knowing others as brothers, leads to the group aspect of religious life. Group religious activities enhance the service of unselfish fellowship, glorify the potentials of family life, promote religious education, provide spiritual guidance, encourage group worship and friendship, conserve morality, and facilitate the spread of the gospel. The dangers of formalized religion include crystallization of beliefs, diversion of religion from the service of God to the service of the church, the inclination of leaders to become administrators instead of ministers, the tendency to form sects and competitive divisions, the establishment of oppressive ecclesiastical authority, the creation of a chosen people attitude, exaggerated ideas of sacredness, a tendency to venerate the past, and failure to hold the interest of youth. Paper 100. Religion and Human Experience. Spiritual growth is stimulated by intimate association with other religionists. Love is the soil for religious growth. A person cannot cause growth, but he can supply favorable conditions. Religious growth is inhibited by prejudice and ignorance. Habits which contribute to religious growth include meditation, sensitivity to divine values, worshipful problem-solving, sharing the spiritual life, and avoidance of selfishness. Religious growth requires self-realization, the coordination of natural talents, curiosity, a sense of adventure, awareness, and humility. Initial awareness of God, spiritual birth, may occur either suddenly or gradually. A spirit-born individual becomes so remotivated in life that he can calmly stand by while his fondest ambitions perish, knowing that the experience will lead to a more noble and enduring universe reality. Genuine religion takes nothing away from life, but adds new meaning, enthusiasm, and courage. A religious outlook elevates the drudgery of daily living. Spiritual growth yields lasting joy. One of the earmarks of religious living is a peace which passes all human understanding, that peace which Paul spoke of when he said, "I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else shall be able to separate us from the love of God." Ideals worth striving for are those that are divine, spiritual, and eternal. The struggle for cosmic ideals is characterized by increasing patience, forbearance, fortitude, and tolerance. Spiritual development depends on maintaining a connection with spiritual forces and in ministering to others. Relationships between religionists stimulate spiritual growth. Understanding others leads us to tolerance, which leads to friendship, which leads ultimately to love. If one could only fathom the motives of others, he would eventually learn to love them. Jesus was the perfectly unified human personality. Jesus was sincere, reasonable, approachable, unafraid, considerate, and cheerful. He taught the truth, he lived the truth, he was the truth. Jesus continues to unify mortal experience and transform the human mind. He unifies life, ennobles character, and simplifies experience. Paper 101. The Real Nature of Religion. Religion is the true experience of eternal realities in time. Religious experiences result from the combined operations of the thought adjuster and the spirit of truth as they work with human ideas, ideals, insights, and spiritual strivings. Religion lives and prospers by faith and insight, eventually resulting in the consciousness of God and assurance of survival. Revelation compensates for the absence of the Urantia viewpoint by providing a technique for comprehension of the relationships of matter and spirit through the mediation of mind. Personal revelation is continuous. Epical revelation is periodic. Revelation enlarges ethics and expands morals. It is validated only by human experience. True religion cannot be observed or understood from the outside. The assurance of a personal God depends wholly on spiritual insight. For people who are assured of spiritual realities, no argument about the reality of God is necessary. But for those who do not know God, no possible argument could be convincing. Spiritual intuition is the endowment of the cosmic mind in association with the divine adjuster. Spiritual reason is the endowment of the Holy Spirit, and spiritual philosophy is the endowment of the Spirit of Truth. The coordination of these spirit endowments creates a potential spirit personality within the mortal host. It is this embryonic spirit personality that is the part of a person that survives after death. A soul reveals itself by the manner in which it reacts to difficult intellectual and social situations. Genuine spiritual faith engenders moral progress, sublime trust in God, profound courage, inexplicable poise, and unswerving faith, in spite of adversity, calamity, disappointment, suffering, injustice, and defeat. The teachings of Jesus provide temporal tranquility, intellectual certainty, moral enlightenment, philosophic stability, ethical sensitivity, God consciousness, and the assurance of personal survival. A personal religious philosophy is derived from both inner and outer experiences. Social status, economic conditions, education, moral trends, politics, racial tendencies, religious teachings, temperament, intellect, vocation, marriage, and can all influence personal standards of life. There are 4 levels in the evolution of personal religious philosophy. 1. Submission to tradition and authority. 2. Small spiritual attainments that stabilize daily life. 3. Dependence on logic, which may stagnate into cultural or scientific bondage. 4. Freedom from tradition and convention to think, act, and live honestly, loyally, and fearlessly. Belief becomes faith when it motivates life and shapes behavior. Living religious faith is more than a set of noble beliefs. It is a living experience concerned with spiritual meanings, divine ideals, and supreme values. Faith is God-knowing and man-serving. Living faith never fosters bigotry, persecution, or intolerance. Paper 102. The Foundations of Religious Faith. Faith stimulates the realization that values can be translated from the material to the spiritual, from the human to the divine, from time into eternity. The certainties of science proceed from the intellect, but the certainties of religion spring from the entire personality. The indwelling adjuster promotes a hunger for perfection that can be satisfied only by communion with God. Religious experience requires spiritual growth, intellectual expansion, factual enlargement, and social service. No real religious growth can be accomplished without a highly active personality. Lazy people may seek to escape the rigors of religious activities by retreating to the false shelter of religious dogmas. Poorly disciplined souls may use religion as an escape from the demands of living. But the true mission of religion is to prepare religionists to bravely face the vicissitudes of life. True religion must act. The pursuit of knowledge constitutes science. The search for wisdom is philosophy. The love of God is religion. The hunger for truth is revelation. Revelation unifies history and coordinates science. Religion is to morality as love is to duty, sonship is to servitude, essence is to substance. The relation between an individual and his creator is a living experience. To isolate religion as one part of life is a disintegration of life and a distortion of religion. Human things must be known in order to be loved, but divine things must be loved in order to be known. Prayer is part of religious experience, but it has been wrongly emphasized by modern religions to the neglect of the more essential communion of worship. The reflective powers of the mind are deepened and broadened by worship. Prayer enriches life, but worship illuminates destiny. Paper 103. The reality of religious experience. Although religious awakening is a gradual process, some spiritual births are accompanied by crisis and anguish, while others are a natural growth of the recognition of spiritual values. Because personalities are unique, no two individuals interpret divine leadings the same way. People tend to agree more easily on religious goals than on beliefs or creeds. Every human being experiences conflict between self-seeking and altruistic impulses. An unselfish choice in the face of a desire to be selfish constitutes a primitive religious experience. God consciousness is sometimes attained as the result of seeking for help in the resolution of such moral conflicts. In the absence of wrong teaching, the minds of normal children move toward moral righteousness and social ministry. The first emergence of a child's moral nature is a response to justice, fairness, or kindness. Unselfish interest in the welfare of others springs from the divine within. Animals cannot make such a choice. Only a fairly well-unified personality can arbitrate the conflicts between ego and social consciousness. When there is failure of personality unification, altruistic tendencies may become overdeveloped and injurious to the welfare of the self. The rights of the self and the rights of one's neighbors must be balanced, although this dilemma cannot always be resolved in time and space. Man's ideals tend to grow by geometric progression, while his ability to live up to his ideals grows only arithmetically. Rather than hoping to live up to his highest ideals, he can try to seek God and become more like him. The pursuit of the ideal, striving to be godlike, is a continuous effort before and after death. The good accomplished in mortal life carries over to the enhancement of life after death and directly contributes to the first stages of a mortal survival experience. Man is truly the architect of his own eternal destiny. Neither science nor religion can hope to provide a complete understanding of universal truths. An analytical study of the cosmos will reveal to the mind and the physical senses that the universe is mechanical and material. A view of the universe from the perspective of the inner life makes all of creation appear to be spiritual. Failure to coordinate these two viewpoints is due to ignorance of the domain between the spiritual and material worlds, the Urantia phase of reality. Man's highest philosophy should be based on the reason of science, the faith of religion, and the insight of revelation. Science and religion are each incomplete and are predicated on assumptions. In the mortal state, nothing can be proven absolutely. Revelation must compensate for the frailties of evolving philosophy. Genuine religion is not merely thinking, but is also feeling, acting, and living. The earmarks of true religion are faith in a supreme deity, hope of eternal survival, and love, especially love of one's fellows. Paper 104. Growth of the Trinity Concept. The first revelation of the Trinity on Earth was made by the planetary prince's staff 500,000 years ago. Subsequent revelations were presented by Adam and Eve, Melchizedek, and Jesus. It has been difficult for cultures emerging into monotheism from polytheism to accept the concept of the Trinity. People of the Hebrew and Islamic faiths find it difficult to differentiate between worshiping multiple gods and the worship of one deity in a triune manifestation. The Paradise Trinity is an entity. The Trinity is not a personality, but is a true and absolute reality eventuating from the conjoining of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Recognition of the Trinity concept leads to understanding the interrelationship of love and law and to the investigation of other triune associations of the first source and center in which the infinite functions in various capacities of force, energy, power, causation, reaction, potentiality, actuality, gravity, tension, pattern, principle, and unity. The completeness of infinity must be reconciled with the incompleteness of the evolving universe. Total reality, infinity, is presented as existing in the seven absolutes: the universal Father, the eternal Son, the infinite Spirit, the Isle of Paradise, the deity absolute, the universal absolute, the unqualified absolute. The Paradise Trinity is not a triunity. It is an undivided and indivisible deity, but the three deities also function as the first triunity. The common factor between Trinity and triunity is that they each result in functions other than what is the discernible from the sum of the attributes of component members. The Universal Father exercises control of the functions of infinity as the primal member of many triunities. He reveals himself as love to the creatures of the evolving cosmos through the personal purposive triunity of the Father, Son, and Spirit. God patterns the universes and organized energy through the power pattern triunity of the Father, Son, the Paradise Isle, and the conjoint actor. All spirit finds reality expression in the spirit evolutional triunity of the Father, the Son Spirit, and the deity absolute. Altogether, there are 15 triune associations of the first source and center in his various functions, and these associations make the subinfinite manifestations of God's reality possible. Other triune relationships, triodities, do not involve the Father, but they result as a consequence of the existence of the triunities. Triodities are directly concerned in the experiential deities, the supreme, ultimate, and absolute.